Hey everyone, it's Classic DM, and we're going to continue our Rise of Aya's video series. And today we're going to actually design and draw out the entire map for the Village of Hommlet, talking about some of the decisions we're making as a DM. So it's kind of like hanging out with me while I'm being a DM and doing the design work. So I'm just going to walk you through everything I've done. I may time lapse some of this stuff later on once I see the video made. I know in the past I've made these map drawing type videos where I drew the whole map and I commented through the entire session. What I might do is I'm going to capture the whole map drawing process from scratch. It usually takes like an hour maybe. And once that's done, I may do a summary of what decisions we made up front and maybe do a video edit and put that in the front. So you folks who have a short attention span and don't want to watch me draw the whole map or everything, you can kind of get the decision making stuff at the end. But that's an experiment. We'll see how that goes. The first thing we need to do is talk about, why are we doing this? So if you haven't caught the series previously, our adventure is going to take place before the original Village of Hum, which is this big poster map we printed at FedEx office for like 13 bucks. I mean, we just basically made this large. It's 18 by 24. It's laminated so it doesn't get screwed up. It's really cool. This is just 11 by 2, 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. We just taped together like a scrub. And we went through the module and thought about, well, gosh, according to all the history and what's happened in the past and some of the tips of why they were building the moat house and what powers were at play, and some of the people that lived in the house, like some of these buildings weren't even there yet. Because what we're doing, as I said before, is we're going back in time. So before the Battle of Emridy Fields, before the Temple Elemental Evil is locked and sealed, before all that, Ayas and the forces of evil men and all kinds of humanoids took over this entire area. So I mentioned the other day in one of the postings, the replies to a comment in the YouTube channel, that we're going to kind of capture that Vichy France. Now, if you know a little bit about World War II, when Hitler invaded France suddenly in 1940, he whipped through the Ardennes forest and he kind of like locked in all the British army, and they made this movie Dunkirk about these 300,000 expeditionary force of British soldiers who all kind of sat around and escaped. That's because Hitler didn't press on. He just left them there. He allowed them to escape because he didn't believe their generals. Their generals at the front line thought that they overextended themselves. They just told everyone to stop. So all the tanks, everything stopped. After that happened and the British all escaped back to England to fight another day, or this withdrawal, whatever you want to call it, France just basically fell. I mean, they completely surrendered to Germany. So this is a kind of a similar situation where you have this, benign farming village that doesn't even have half the things that are here aren't even built yet. And they get conquered by Ayaz's forces, and they just kind of surrender. So they're occupied. So there's no real reason to like wipe the floor with the entire place and start building an amusement park. There's no real reason to just burn everything to the ground. This becomes a great place to get labor. And it mentions in the original Temple Elemental Evil, if you go to the beginning of the description of Nulb and the moat house, it actually tells you about how the intent was that they would enslave the men, and they're going to use them to build a fortress to the west, which is this way. Okay, the moat house adventure itself is over that way. So in a way over that way is also the Temple of Elemental Evil. So at the time we're going to draw this map, the Temple Elemental Evil is already built. The moat house is already built. A lot of things in this map changes, and they're in the process of building another fortress this way. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to do. All right, so how do we do it? So we went through the entire module, and where there's things like large new barn connected with home. This place is obviously that of a herdsman. His wife is dead, and a full-grown son and wife care for the 5 children. Some of these things were like, this building wasn't even built here. And what I did is, besides just reading it to you, I went through the actual map. And this is the breakdown of the map. Everything marked out in brown didn't exist. So there's no tower being built with Rufus and Doofus or whatever. There's no people camping out in these forests. There's no stonemason. This herdsman in the barn, the wheelwright's not here. This barn isn't here yet. This family's kind of impoverished. The Church of St. Cuthbert isn't here. The jewelry money changer isn't here. The teamster isn't here yet. The village hall isn't built yet. And we're not removing these things because we want to. We're removing these things because we're going to go back in time. Like imagine, what did Paris look like in 1940? It looks a lot different then than it does now. So let's get started. So as usual, we have this as our reference. We'll keep this off camera for now. We're just going to do this as a single shot. And these are the types of tools we use. You've seen me use in the past. We use this tracing paper. In this situation, this is Bean Fang. This is usually architectural tracing paper. It comes in a roll. This is 20 yards long, 8 inches wide. So what we do is we overlay tracing paper, and we drew everything freehand. We don't use any drafting T-squares. We don't use AutoCAD or anything like that. We do it old school style, old traditional media. So we got a piece of paper already, and we use a scale is just for tearing the paper. A crappy Office Depot #2 pencil, which is as reliable as a wet paper bag, a crappy stapler's pencil sharpener, a decent little architectural eraser, 3 line weights, a Sharpie permanent fine line, a Sharpie chisel point, and a twin tip Sharpie. And so the first thing we need to do is you get our tracing paper on here. So let's go ahead. And one thing that's very interesting when you're doing this kind of work, you do this kind of drawing, you're designing your campaign world. If you're modifying someone else's campaign or you're doing your own, is by using the tracing paper, you can actually do the first draft and screw it all up, and then roll another piece of tracing paper on top of it, and then make a better version of it. So one thing I always try to do is when you get the tracing paper, you got to get the air out from underneath it, which isn't that big of a deal. And then from there, I can kind of slide it over. And since I'm just using crappy, completely crappy masking tape, this junk here, Scotch tape, it's probably 20 years old, been sitting in the garage. It's way too big. I wouldn't normally use tape that's this big, but it's super duper sticky adhesive. You can just hear it tear as I pull it off. It's terrible. When I pull this stuff up later, it's going to rip the paper. And I could go out and buy drafting tape, but I'm not going to. So we're going to just tape this down relatively square. What I try to do is I try to line up this edge with the edge of the actual map. And since I enlarged this in PowerPoint presentation, turned it to a PDF and printed it, it's not exactly totally perfect. You can see kind of like with this thing here, I've got 2 pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper that have been taped together here and here to do this. I took a picture of this. I took the digital version of this to the PDF and put it in a PowerPoint and made it 18 by 24. So it's not totally 100% accurate. But what I want to do is I do want to make sure this paper kind of lines up square. Now I won't be able to take this and print it or anything because this paper is so flimsy. It would just get chewed up by a printing machine. So usually what I'm going to do then is tape in the starting edge, which is this edge over here closest to me. And I've got the camera turned so you can see the map the way you would see it. So when you used to play this module, it's turned the way that you would see it. So things will be turned at an angle a little bit. We'll just take this piece and tear it in half. We got most of the air out of here. And it's a humid Saturday here in Texas, so we're just going to keep it low key. That's too much tape for that. So what I'll usually do first, I've already done some pre-planning. You're not having to go through the whole pre-planning phase. Is I want to kind of get the buildings down first, the ones that are really here. So we're just going to leave this thing over here, and we're just going to kind of square out what buildings are really here. So we'll just start down in this area down here and just kind of organically work our way this way, and we'll do all the trees later. We'll do all the different elevation changes later. We'll do the river and the bridge. We'll have to add a bridge. They never drew a bridge in the original map. People just run across a muddy river. We'll do all the topography later, and then we'll flip things in the back and do all kinds of fun stuff. So let's just go ahead and start with these. What we're going to do is I don't really need to sketch out too much where things are because I can trace over the original map. So in this situation, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and jump into inking this. We have our grid here. This isn't really a 2-inch grid, just to give you a sense of how well it reads on the grid. And we actually put a big piece of plexiglass on top of it. Let's turn it this way so you can see a little bit better. There you go. So that's how it would work on the grid. We're not going to use a grid, but we use, for this is an exterior map, we probably should put some kind of a square reference point on there. So this is how we would do it when we're playing. We'd have this on this plexiglass here. We could just draw all over the place and do whatever we want to do. Then we just erase it off. It's no big deal. So one thing I want to do is I'm going to go back to the original map. Right? Let's get our plexiglass out of here. We're going to go back to the original map. Get the grid out of here. All this stuff is so cheap to make too. It costs you like nothing. You're just spending time drawing. You're not really doing anything too hard at all. Let's put this back down, see if I can get this lined up with the camera pretty good. Alright, there we go. We got our river. It's like Back to the Future. Okay. So fortunately, we have things we can line things up with, right? We're going to line this up with the buildings. And the welcome winch. We've got the road. And we're organic, so it doesn't have to be totally perfect. Pull this over like that just a little bit. Now we're not going to do anything with tracer, but what I am going to do is I'm going to copy this scale marker. And, you know, I'm going to do it in pencil first. So I'm just going to put a pencil grid like this. And each one of these grid lines equals 20 feet. This will give me an idea of how does it line up. Each one of those is 20 feet. How does it line up with the grid board? Let's take the grid board and put that down. I'm not going to put the plexiglass down. Let's just bring this down to the bottom. Let's put our grid kind of leveled as best we can. Here's our little map. And what I'm looking for is here, when my map lines up on the grid, we're looking here to see. So it looks like, oh, it looks like almost perfect, right? Check this out, just a fluke. So one square is actually 60 feet. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a scale marker here. You know, I don't want to make it miss a line though. It's okay. We'll just do it like this. We're off a little bit, but who cares? We're going to draw this on here. And each one of those is 20 feet. And then we'll erase this extra stuff off that we don't need. We don't need these graphite lines anymore. Just going to darken in these with little tonal lines. Each one of these is 20 feet. So then when we're playing, we have a sense of what a 20-foot grid is. This kind of sits maybe about like that. So this gives us something to work with for scale. Because the whole thing is organic, it's not to scale. Now, the last thing we really need to do is figure out what to do with this road. Because right now you have a bunch of thin lines of the same line weight. This thin, super permanent marker, ultra fine point. We can't really tell what our road is. So I think what we're going to do is stipple the devil out of the road. But I think that's enough. I think that's enough for the drawing of the video. I think for, I'll go back and edit this and try to do some time lapses to speed up some of the stuff. And then we'll show you the final version of the map at the end here. So that's basically what we did. We took the original map, we figured out what was there, what wasn't there. We drew it. And now we can use our cool little battle map thing. You know, and when we're playing, you know, this isn't the size for the miniatures. You know, we've got a bunch of miniatures we haven't painted yet that we picked out to represent our party. You know, you can't use the miniatures on it because the scale's so funky. But you can have a game session where you talk about, okay, what's the party going to do? We're just going to say this represents the party. The party is here, and you see, there's a bunch of guards here. So you can kind of sense of like, okay, how far away is this? What's going on between here and here? Well, listen, we're going to go down these hills. We're going to wrap around this way. So you can do that kind of conversation when we're playing the map. Or you're saying, we're riding in over the cover of the darkness. We're going to go to the top of this bluff and see how far we can see, and all this kind of stuff. So you can actually mark on here and have a tactical situation happening. There's a patrol that's walking up and down the road. The patrol's here. Your chance to run down, to sneak down. So that kind of fun covert action type action can happen at a larger scale. And we can just mark on the plastic plexiglass without ruining our cool map that we made underneath it. All right, that's it for now. And let me do some edits and see if we can get this thing posted and see if it's of use to you. Talk to you later. Take care. See ya.